It's recording now. Or it should be. Yep, it is. Okay. So today we're going to talk about negotiation planning, where power comes from in negotiation, and some things you can try to do to get to an agreement. There's some tactics that you can try. Okay. Now, just 1 second here. One final adjustment. I'll stop share for a second. I'm going to turn off my video. So then you should just see the screen. I hope. Let's see if this works. Okay. Share screen. Oh, did that work? I hope. Okay. Yes. So now you can't see me anymore, but you can see the screen.
Yeah.
Okay. And it also should show the person who is talking, or at least the name of the person who is talking. And right now, that's me. And we're recording. So if you have any questions as we go along, by all means, speak up or send a question to the chat. So last week we talked quite a bit about negotiation and the importance of planning and the phases you go through. So today, whoops, we'll talk about planning in a lot more detail. And the key to planning is to develop the plan, but also to distinguish between the plan and the strategy. And there are strategies, and we'll talk about what kind of research to do and you know what actions you can take. And then the fun part is the tactics, or can be, where people think that these are the things, the tricks. Some people refer to them as tricks for negotiation, and many people think these are things you have to get good at. I think it's just important to know what they are, and maybe know when they're being done to you. So anyway, we'll get into that as well. So people often wonder, you know, why a negotiation doesn't work and why things fall apart. And there are several reasons. There's probably hundreds of reasons, but they kind of boil down to some of these things that we often don't pay enough attention to what the other party wants, or what the other party's needs are, or the other party's, as it says, problems. Everybody comes to a negotiation to try to get their needs met. And so if you're negotiating with somebody and they seem very interested in what your needs are, and they seem very interested in having you go away, having your needs met, the probability of success is a lot higher. So I'm not paying enough attention to the other party's problems. As a buyer, or even as a seller, we focus too much on price, when there may be actually other issues that are more important, or as important, or more important. Last week we talked about the kids arguing over the orange, and they couldn't come to an agreement because they were all hung up on their positions. They each wanted the orange, rather than getting into a discussion about the why. Why do you want the orange? What is it that you really want? What are you trying to achieve? And those are interests. This is probably a very critical one, distinguishing between position and interest. Okay. The fourth one here, focus too much on common ground. That may seem a bit odd, because you do want to talk about common ground, but you need eventually to get into each other's needs and wants, and what your positions are and what your interests really are. So you need to talk about each side and how they're different, not just the way that you're both the same. You tend to forget about BATNAs. Who has a stronger alternative? Or you don't think about your alternatives or talk about the alternatives. And then people quite often get upset and make judgment calls, and they make assumptions and think, oh, what I was thinking, I guess, wasn't right. Things aren't going the way I had hoped they would go. And so we tend to over adjust. We tend to panic. Um, we tend to say, oh, I guess what I was thinking about the other side, that assumption isn't true. And we change as we go, which is okay, but it's better to, rather than move away from your plan without thinking about it, stop, think about it, and then decide whether or not to change your plan or not. So when you are planning, there are some things you need to do. And I know this is a fairly obvious one, but what is your objective? What are you trying to do? And that is so often overlooked. People do their planning. They think they know what they want, but there may be actually a couple of things they want, and they end up talking about only one and rather than several. So it's really important to think about, what is it you want? What are you trying to achieve? And here are some examples. These are just typical ones. What would be your unit price? If it is, that's one of the things usually it's on the list. What kind of the quantities? What are you trying to get in terms of lead time? What is your concern about quality? So price, quantity, lead time, quality. The standard stuff, but we tend not to pay enough attention to it because they're not all the same. And we tend to ignore the ones, oh, that isn't really important. And so we tend not to put it on the table. We don't tend not to think about it. It's very important to get everything written down. And like that planning template that I sent last week is a good tool. And you can write everything down and decide which ones are important. You need to prioritize them. Okay? Because this is the list that you will use when you start figuring out, okay, well, if they give us this, then we'll give them that. And this is really important. We're prepared to give on this. If they don't agree with this, yeah, we can give on that because that's not very important. That's called the concession strategy. It's the give and take as we go through it. So unless you have quite a good list of what issues are important to you and what issues are not important to you, then you won't know what to give and when and how to exchange things of value. You need to figure out who is strong and who is weak and in what way. Okay, and this comes up in a couple of different ways through experience and doing research. It comes down to personality, negotiation style. Do you have any previous experience with the other party? Have you negotiated before? And these all come down to figuring out what the other side's strengths and weaknesses are. And it always changes. In every time you negotiate, you will find something different. Even if you've negotiated with the group before, or the person before, something you thought was a strength may turn out to be a weakness, or in a particular situation, they may not be as good as something as they were last time. So as it says here, each negotiation experience is unique. So don't make assumptions. Don't go into it assuming, oh, we've negotiated with these people before. We know what they're good at. We know what they're not good at. We know what their strengths and weaknesses are. You might have a pretty good idea, but it's still worth thinking about it and just making sure that nothing has changed. How do you find relevant information from previous experience? Is one of the most common ways. Okay, when you negotiated before, what happened? Were you satisfied? Is this team the same or is it different? It might be the same company, but are the people the same? Or have they changed somebody? And when the last time we talked, what was important to them and what was important, well, to us, assuming that we're the buyer mostly, okay? So what happened? Who was happy? Were both people happy? Is it the same group? What did we disagree about? Okay. And when you do the negotiation, it's always good to write down things when it's all done, that you can refer to the next time. Things that you probably would think, well, next time we negotiate, we should change this. We should do this a little differently. So this is where you go back and you check your notes. And it says, was there anything in the previous negotiation that we should change? Should we not talk about this? Should we talk about that? Should we not take this position? Did we give in too early? Whatever it might be. And that's one of the biggest ones that people ignore. They don't make notes when the negotiation finishes about things to do differently the next time. Who's the more powerful? We'll be talking a lot about power and where power comes from. Who has the most to lose? Who has the most to gain? Again, that's connected to BATNA as well. You know, who's got the better alternative? Who is more desperate, etc. Where do you get this information when you want to do your research? Well, there are lots of different places to go. I mean, Google is not the only place. We all tend to go to Google first, but nothing wrong with Google. You can get a lot of good information if you're starting from scratch. But if you know somebody else who might have dealt with this supplier before, even within your own organization, if you work in a procurement department, you might be negotiating with a supplier. The first place to look is, has anybody in your company dealt with that supplier before? That's one of the most reliable sources. And then there's all kinds of published information, trade journals and publications and internet websites, and we say Dr. Google, government data. Reading if you really want to know about a company, reading their annual report can be very good, very useful. And there's lots of different companies, Dun & Bradstreet and among others, that evaluate companies, and they put all that information on databases. You can check their credit record, and then you can just, talking with them, asking questions about them. Talk to their salespeople. Their salespeople love to talk. Salespeople generally do. And so, even before the negotiation starts, just call them up and say, can we have a conversation with a salesperson, or go and meet them and, have a coffee or a lunch or whatever. They'll take you out to lunch. And if there's things you're wondering about, ask. They'll be happy to tell you if you're considering using them as a supplier. Now, as we said, one of the number one reasons for negotiations failing is that we don't look at what the other party wants and needs. So this is connected to going beyond the current negotiation. You need to think about whether or not, is this just kind of a one-time deal? Is it a single transaction? We're not likely to be doing business with this company again. It's something that we need right now. We probably won't need it again. Fine. That's one way to look at it. Usually, though, there is a future, and it's very useful to think about what is the longer term success factors for you and them. Okay. And what's important to you may not be important to them, and vice versa. And so it's really important to see if you can assess as best you can, what are the other party's needs and what is important to them. What might they say? Okay. And there'll be a slide coming up here in a little while where we'll show the give and take, and how to anticipate the give and take, and you're not going to win every issue. You're going to have to give something to get something, but how do you decide? If you can give away something that is relatively low value to you, and in return get something that is quite high value to you, well, that's clearly a win-win. And if they're giving something to you that's of value to you but not to them, then that's great. Nobody really suffers. They're giving you something that isn't that important to them, but it's important to you. Okay, so that's all comes from the planning and setting the priorities, and how are we? What's the give and take plan? I call it the give and take plan. The official word for that is the concessions. How are we going to do it? Facts and issues. Facts are what you can actually verify. I know this sounds like a bit obvious. Well, what's a fact? One of the tactics in negotiation, which you'll see, is that people quite often, they'll say something at the table which might appear to be true, and I'm not saying they would outright lie, but they might say something in a different way that um, makes it sound like it's a little bit different. Okay, so be sure you know whether you're dealing with facts or opinions or impressions or rumors. When someone says that something is true, um, make sure that it's something that you can verify and that it is really a fact. Issue. This is the big one. The items and topics to be resolved, and what are they, and what are we trying to achieve here? And that goes back to the list of what do we want to do? What are our objectives? What are we arguing over, haggling over? Is it price? Is it quality? Is it quantity? Is it the contract terms? Is it the length of the agreement? What are the issues? Okay. So, excuse me. This is the same chart that we saw last week. Know what you want, know what they want, and then propose something that is proposed in such a way that they'll accept it. Now, hopefully it's something that you want, right? So if you propose something that you'd like to get, but you're asking for something that's of relatively low value to them, yeah, okay, they can probably accept it. So it looks like a simple statement, propose action in a way that they can accept, but it's a very complicated thing to do. Like, how do you know what they'll accept? How do you know what their priorities are, etc.? So 3 steps, and if you can do all 3 really well, then the negotiation is bound to go very well. So on each issue, price, quantity, or whatever, you need to establish what is your position on those issues. Obviously, okay. What is it that you're hoping for? Okay. So, but you do need to be flexible, and you may need to change as you go. Now, the range of positions, and again here, this is a mistake. This slide is wrong. The minimum acceptable position is not your BATNA, correct? It is the reservation point. So the minimum acceptable position is the reservation point. I'm sorry, I was going through these. I should have corrected this slide, and I will as soon as we're done. So the minimum acceptable position is the reservation point. It is not your BATNA. Okay. And then, your maximum position, your ideal. Gee, we would love to be able to achieve this. That would be fantastic if we could get that. Okay. And then where do you think it's actually going to land? What's the most likely outcome? Okay. And then if the 2 sides have minimum and maximum positions and they overlap, good thing they overlap, that's called the zone of possible agreement. Here it is. And so, or in this case, zone of likely agreement. The Harvard people call it the zone of possible agreement, ZOPA. And again, this slide's got that same errors in it, BATNA and BATNA. Those are not BATNAs. Those are reservation points. So in this case, the buyer is probably is prepared to pay as much as $11.45. That's the most they'll pay. They would like to be able to get it for $11. So that's their zone of acceptability, between $11 and $11.45. Okay, they wouldn't go any higher than $11.45. That's their reservation point. Okay, now the seller, they would like to sell it for $11.50. That would be a great aspiration point. That would be fantastic for them. They're prepared to sell it for as low as $1.15. So their acceptable range is $11.15 to $11.50. So the acceptable ranges overlap. This is really a key point. at least if you know, or you have some way of knowing what each side's reservation points are and aspiration points, then, and if you know they overlap, then you do have what's called a positive zone of zone of likely agreement. There's a range in that orange section where both sides would be at least willing to accept. May not be as happy as they want to be, but it's an area where they would accept. So if it happens to land dead in the middle, maybe that's the best, who knows. But this is called a positive bargaining zone. I have another slide where, like, what would happen if those zones did not overlap. In other words, the highest price that the buyer was prepared to pay was lower than the lowest price the seller would sell for. And there's no zone of agreement. There's just nothing to talk about. But you generally don't know that. So one of the keys in preparation or in the early stages of the negotiation is to try to determine, do we at least have a positive bargaining zone? Do we have something to talk about? And if things are not going very well, things are going quite slowly, or we don't seem to be getting to an agreement, then it might be worth even asking the question, hey, are we even in the right ballpark here? Do we have anything to talk about? Or would you be willing to settle in kind of somewhere in this range? And if the other side says, whoa, no, that isn't even in the range of our acceptability for us. Okay, then you got a problem. So then you try to figure that out. So the ZOPA, the BATNA and the ZOPA, the zone of possible agreement or zone of likely agreement, is a very important concept. And it's important to know that you have a positive bargaining zone at least, or it seems like you do. Otherwise, there's no sense in negotiating, right? So, what would make you change your position? Okay, so if you're negotiating and you've got a position on a given issue, but why would you possibly change that? Maybe you had a lowest possible price, or if you're a buyer, a highest possible price, and maybe you have to change that. Okay, why would you change your position? One, how badly do you want the contract? How desirable is it? If it's sort of we don't care, and that's also connected to the BATNA. This particular contract is not all that important to us, meaning we either have alternatives or we can do something else. We have a strong BATNA. So we're not as needy, we're not as desperate for this contract. So we would therefore not change our position. If, however, it was something that really was important to us, we had a weak BATNA, we really had to get this contract, then you may change your position if it looks like you would have to. And then during the negotiation, you may learn something that you didn't know. That maybe your original position was based on things you thought were true, and partway through the negotiation, some information comes up, the other side says something, and it's, oops, whoa, we didn't know that. But again, you need to check, call a break, call a caucus, whatever, and make sure that what the other side is saying is true. It's irrefutable. They're not just trying to trick you into believing something that isn't really true, okay? So information may change. Now, the other thing is, maybe the other side makes a major move. They make a major concession. They really move on an issue, and now you kind of owe them something. And you think that in order to keep the negotiation reasonably balanced, you better reciprocate on another issue. And so maybe you may move your reservation point on another issue and give in on something you weren't going to give in on before, because the other party just gave in on a big issue too. Okay. You can do the same thing. You can make a major concession on something that you maybe that you know is important to the other side. If it was an important issue to them, not as important to you, you might give in on it. Hey, you make a major concession as a way of making them feel obliged to you. Okay, so everything we talk about here goes both ways. Now, strategy. That's the preparation. That's the plan. Now, the strategy is, what are we going to do? What is our approach going to be? Are we going to be really strong? Are we going to be very friendly? Are we going to give in a little? Are we not going to give in a lot? What are we going to have to do to come to a mutually beneficial agreement? What is the negotiation going to look like? Okay, that's what the strategy is. Are we going to be hard? Are we going to be soft? Are we going to be collaborative? Are we looking for a collaboration? So once you've decided on your strategy, then the tactics come to play. The art or the skill of employing available means to accomplish an objective. So there's lots of different kinds of tactics that we'll talk about as well. Other people who are in your world but who may not be at the table. Your bosses, your peers, maybe you've got partners, okay, that will be affected by this negotiation. You need to make sure that you talk to them all so that they know, so you know what their interests are, and especially if it's your boss, or maybe you are negotiating something that you don't really have full authority for. So you know that you'll have to ask somebody else to approve the deal that you negotiate at the table. Well, you have to make sure that you tell them in advance what you're doing so you don't surprise them. Okay. So stakeholders can be almost anybody. If you're negotiating the sale of your house, have to talk to your family, I guess, or whatever it might be. So you need to understand what the other people in your, what I call stakeholders in your world, make sure they all agree with what you're doing and what your objectives are. And so that way you won't have a surprise later when you go to tell them what you did and they say, whoa, we don't agree with that. Practicing a negotiation is actually an interesting thing to do. I have been involved in a couple of these, and you do them internally. And sometimes they call them the red team, kind of a review. And you essentially, if you go and find somebody in your company or in your group or a friend, it could be, if it's one-on-one, you could even get a friend to play the other role. You ask somebody to see if they would play the other role, and you give them information, whatever, and you actually practice. You go through a negotiation as if you were doing the real negotiation, and some questions will come up and issues come up, and you can have some fun with it because it doesn't really you don't really lose, but you will find things that you wouldn't know otherwise, especially when you can find somebody who has no real vested interest in the negotiation. Like, they don't really know what's going on. You kind of brief them, and but they don't care about the outcome, and you get them to play the tough role. Maybe say, hey, I want you to play the other side, and I want you to be really tough on me. I want you to ask all the tough questions. I want you to blah, blah, blah. And so that is a very good thing to do. Sometimes call it a mock or a simulated negotiation. As I said, sometimes called the red team review. So I've seen that work very well when people are submitting proposals. Before they submit a proposal in response to an RFP, they get somebody else to read the proposal and ask all kinds of questions about it. Did you think about this? Did you think about that? I don't think this is right. I don't think that is right. And it's an internal review, and the same thing can go on with a negotiation. So it's a very good thing to do, especially if it's a big deal, a big deal, or it's going to be a long one, or it's very crucial. Okay. Power. Okay. That's going to stop at this point, I think. And before we get into power, and let me do that. I'll stop the share here, and I will do video. Okay. What I'm going to try now is the breakout rooms. And what we're going to be talking about here is, because this is one of the sources of power, if you will, is that when there are how many people? There are 26, I mean 25, right? You'll be in pairs. There'll be one group of 3. Okay, you'll be in pairs. But what I want you to do now, before we break up into the meeting rooms, is just write down something that you really believe in. Just something you've got a really strong belief about. It can be pretty much anything. It can be, Trump is a good president, or Trudeau is a good prime minister, or all kids should go to university, or, smoking is bad, whatever you might feel really strongly about. Just write down something that you feel you have a good, strong opinion about, something that you really believe. Okay. Take a minute to write 2 things down, actually, and call them items 1 and 2. 2 things that you really believe. Okay. Take a few minutes to do that. I said it can be anything from economics to marijuana should be legalized, or well, it shouldn't be, or what, it doesn't matter, but just anything that you feel really strongly about. Write down 2 things, just 1 sentence each. Maybe just give me a show of hands when you've got your 2 things written down on your reactions button. Good. We're getting a few. Anybody else got some things written down? Give me one of those. Thanks, Daisy. Doesn't have to be a big deal, just something that you feel strongly about. Oh, Tracy, I see. Okay, I see your thumb up, Tracy. Yeah, doesn't have to go on the chat. It can just go on. It'll just show up beside your name. Thanks, Sajiv. Okay, we're getting a few more people. I want to give you a little bit of time to do it, just so that when we're going into the breakout rooms. So what's going to happen here is after I separate you into your breakout rooms, one person is going to talk, trying to convince the other person of something, and you'll have a discussion back and forth. And you'll do that for a couple of minutes, and then I'll stop you. I hope I'll be able to talk to all of you at once. I'll stop you, and then the other person is going to be the primary speaker, and we're going to do 4 of those for just a couple of minutes each. And what we're going to find out, well, I'll tell you later what we're going to find out. But you'll see the importance, the idea being here, the importance of trying to argue something that you really believe in, and how that affects you, and the way you talk, and the way you discuss when it is something that that you really do believe in. So let's try let's try to get the breakout rooms done here. Okay, breakout rooms. Automatically assign 25 participants into. Okay, it's done the split. Breakout room 1 will have 3 in it. Okay, I'm going to open all the rooms now. So you get an invitation to join. You should all join in. Can you all hear me? Okay.
Hello?
Hello?
Kit left the breakout room, so we're
Yeah,
back here.
I'm closing all the rooms now.
Okay.
Okay.
It's too short.
Yeah, it was a bit too short.
Priya just simply.
That's okay. That's all right. I was just trying something there. What I wasn't sure if I could broadcast to you all.
There is no
Okay.
one in my room. I was only one.
Yeah, Jane,
So
are
you
you
speak
there?
to yourself.
Jane,
Yes, yes,
did
Doc.
you join your breakout room?
Okay. I don't see now the breakout message here. A while ago, I joined with Tran. Me and Tran are paired.
I can't hear you very well.
I don't see now the. I don't see now the prompt of a breakout room. A while ago, I was able to join with Tran. I was paired with Tran a while ago.
So you can't see the breakout rooms?
Not anymore. A while ago, I was able to.
Oh, okay. Well, I've closed them all, but you're still now you're still all in the same breakout rooms. So now I know how. I was trying to figure out how I can broadcast a message to everybody. But we'll do this. So what we're going to do, that'll work out quite well. So I'm going to open all the rooms again, okay? And you decide who's going to be the first speaker, okay? And that person, you tell the other person about the thing you felt so strongly about, okay? And if someone said, well, maybe they'll agree. Well, if they agree, that's fine. That's okay. The other person, try to argue against it. Okay, one person is going to talk about what they really believe. The other person is going to argue against it. Okay, even though you might agree, argue against them. All right. So person number one, speak about something you believe about, and person number two, you argue against them. And I'm going to let that go for about 3 minutes. Okay. So I'm going to open the rooms now, and you can start your discussion. So Lynn,
Yes?
I've joined your room. Has Rehab joined you yet?
No, not yet. It's only me.
I wonder why Rehab hasn't joined yet.
I think Ratan is also not like she's unable to join the meeting.
She's unable to?
Yeah,
Why?
Ratan.
Why?
I don't know, cause like she messaged in our class group chat, and she asked us if like we are all connected, and I saw her message. Ratan, she said that she got an error and she's not able to join the meeting.
I wonder why. Okay. All right. All right. I'm going to leave the room now, Lynn. I'll see what's going
Okay.
on with her. Leave the breakout.
Oh.
Rehab, can you hear me? Rehab, can you hear me?
Sorry, sir, I was disconnected.
Okay. Is this Ratan?
Yeah.
Can you join your meeting room?
How to join it? I don't know.
Okay, just a minute. Unassigned. Okay, I'm going to assign you to meeting room, breakout room 6 with Lynn.
Okay.
Did you get a message to join?
To me.
Yeah.
Okay, so Lynn and Ratan,
Yes, sir.
Okay.
now you're together. You give it a try, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. So, it's also like you have to have some like luck in it.
Okay.
Yeah, so like there's a lot of people that work really hard, but that they but they still like struggling to have their own success.
I'm just going to interrupt for a second. Breakout room 6. I see Rehab, you are in there now, are you?
Yes.
Okay, well, you guys can kind of take turns, all right?
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, sir.
Hello.
Hello. We're just getting everybody back to the main session here.
So it was really fun. Doug, it was really fun.
That was fun actually.
Yes,
Yeah,
that was fun. That was fun.
yeah. Like
Kaushik,
That was fun.
seriously,
Kaushik, who
Yeah, that
with
was
whom?
fun.
I was with Manpreet. Like we were talking.
Oh.
I was with
Me
His
and-
Highness Roy.
And me
I was
and
with-
Vice President.
Bin.
Okay,
No,
okay.
President and
Jane,
Vice
psycho.
President.
You were with Jane?
No.
I was with Tracy.
Alex, were you with Bin or no?
It's Mukesh, Mr.
I was
President.
with Bin.
All right, everybody.
Sad.
Oh, you were with Mukesh. Then you would have surely enjoyed.
Absolutely.
Well, all right, let's, that went well. One group didn't have very long because I had to rearrange the rooms a little bit. So we're going to do it again, same groups. I'm going to start again. Now just change speakers, have somebody else, another person. Now the second person's going to speak now, okay?
Doug.
And I want you to argue the opposite of what you wrote down. So you may have said, you may have written down something you feel really strongly about. I want you to try to argue the opposite of it. And the other person argue with them.
Oh, great, great. That is like,
You're going to try to argue something that you don't believe in.
yeah. Now the fun will be increased.
Okay, I'm going to open all the rooms and I'll give it, let's give it a good 5 minutes, okay? All right.
Okay.
Go.
Hi, Doug.
Hi, Tijo. Nadia hasn't joined you. Oh, there she is. Okay,
Yeah.
I'll go away.
Bin is with Keith. They're roommates. It's fun.
Doug, it was really fun.
Good.
We back again with
Yeah,
bang, bang,
yeah.
bang.
It's so
We
difficult.
could not.
Hello.
I could not think
It's
like
very
it would
fun.
be that much fun.
It's very fun.
Don't
Yeah,
Okay.
Mukesh, for you it is always.
Yeah, it's always hanging with our friends. Vice president, president.
Okay, President.
Okay, well, we're not done yet. But this is really interesting because when we do this in the classroom, you can imagine how noisy it is because we have 12 pairs of people talking in the classroom, so it's very noisy.
No, but we are missing our class too much.
I know. So, excuse me. So now, we're going to go back to person number one. You go back to person number one, and you look at the second item that you wrote down, and you argue the opposite of it. So person number one, you're talking again, but you're going to argue the opposite of what you wrote down as your number two item. So you're doing now what number two just did. So you're going to argue, you wrote down something that you really believe in, but now you want to convince the other person of the opposite of that. Person number one.
So, Doug, should we take the break right now or?
So we're going to take a break in about 5 minutes. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. As soon as we finish all this, we'll take the break. So we'll do this one more time. Go.
We are ready.
Your selling price is 11.50, and my buying price, I want to haggle it to $11, right?
Yeah.
So where should we meet? I mean, how do we? What do you agree?
Yeah.
Mm.
What a busy day.
Hello.
Hello. We're all
Yeah.
coming back.
Hello.
It was extremely fun.
Good.
Oh, Alex, with whom?
We ran out of topics now. Vladimir.
Okay. Well, you know what we could do? The second person hasn't had a chance to talk about what they really believe in. So this will be the fourth one. So we can let's do one more one. It'll be the last one. And if you really can't do it, just it's okay. If someone has to take a break. But after we do this last one, then we'll take our break.
Not okay.
Well, this time, person number two, you get to argue the second thing you wrote down. Then the thing you really believe in, you get to argue that. And person number one, you argue against them. Come on, let's go. Okay?
Sir, I did not go back into my group, so I don't know what happened.
Is this Joel?
Yeah,
Okay, what group were you in?
I was with Ben. Breakout 3, I think so. Yeah, it was 3.
Okay, I'll put you back in.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, so I guess we're all back.
Yes.
Only 24.
Oh, Bean, where is you, Bean? Hey, Bean.
Long time no see.
Okay. All right. Well, just a quick, so you get the idea. Quick thoughts from anybody. What was the difference that you noticed when you were arguing something that you believed in versus arguing something that you didn't believe in?
It's very hard to oppose that something you believe in.
Yeah.
When you're talking about that, it is very hard because you don't have so many points when you're arguing against what you believe.
I couldn't
very
even think of
difficult, yeah.
one point.
Exactly.
Because it was,
Like if you have like believe something, you have a very strong point to argue with other. Like if you don't have points to others, it's very difficult to argue.
Yep, for sure.
I think so, because we didn't. It was difficult for us to find the points which we support for, because we were thinking about the ones we actually support for.
Yeah, your bias influence your arguments.
Yeah, and we didn't give much thought about the other side of what we're thinking.
So I think when you're getting into an argument, I think you should know what both parties will be arguing about. You should have a
Knowledge.
thought. Yeah.
Proper knowledge about the topic which you are discussing.
Yeah, for sure. And Rehab?
Where is she? I think
Can
she
you
is
hear me,
not-
Rahab?
She's not here.
She's here.
Yeah,
She's
yeah.
here? Yeah.
I can hear you.
Rahab, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You people had a group of 3.
Yes.
How did that work out?
It's a little bit hard to speak for something you don't believe in, because, as my classmate said, there are no points to argue for, or you don't believe in it. Ratan and Lynn, for example, they spoke about how can you convince somebody with, for example, if the sky is green. Lynn said that it's very subjective to have an opinion, but I disagree. We have to respect each other's opinions, but I couldn't persuade her. For example, I can't persuade you that the sky is red because I don't have points, or I don't have a ground to stand on.
Yeah, for sure. So it's clearly very difficult. So in the real world, you might be negotiating, for a company, and and your boss tells you that, well, hey, you got to go talk to these suppliers, and I want you to come back with a 20% reduction in the price or something like that. And you might have to go into the negotiation not really thinking that that's fair. Your boss might be telling you to negotiate something that, and deep in your heart, you don't think that's fair. So we often find situations kind of like that, where we're in a situation where we have to try to make an argument, and we may not really agree with it particularly, but we're required to do it because that's what our boss says, that's what the company wants, or whatever.
Okay, but how can you reach a middle point if the other side is also doesn't believe in what you say?
Good question. Yeah, it's a good question. And there's no good question, Rehab, and I guess there's no quick answer. You just find yourself in a more difficult position to try to negotiate when deep in your heart you may not believe it.
Yeah.
Just to add on that, yes, because sometimes it's a question of also your personal ethics. If you are being tasked to carry out something which you don't believe in, it could be issuing a memo which you don't believe in to somebody who does not deserve it.
Yeah.
But in this case, I think, for example, in negotiating the price, I won't be, it won't look good to, for example, to my boss saying that I don't believe in what you want.
Well, you can ask questions.
In terms of price, I'd like to add to that. What sometimes some people do is it's like they come to a compromise that maybe you don't get 20% off, but just 10%, but they also give you a better lead time for the product you're negotiating on.
Right.
Yeah, this is
Yeah,
a good
good point, B. There's always a mix, right?
Yeah.
But I think the other point that Rehab made is if you're being asked to do something and you don't really, and you don't think you can achieve it, the best thing to do is, talk to your boss and say, I know what the company would really like is to get the 20% reduction in the price, but going into the negotiation, I don't think we can do that. And basically negotiate with your boss first before you go into the negotiation with the supplier. And et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. In fact, in about a week, I'm going to try to do this in about week 8 or 9. There's a negotiation exercise where you do negotiate with your boss before you negotiate with your supplier. So I'm going to try to do that one, but it becomes a 3-way. Okay. Let's take a break. I sent you all an email, so you should have the link to the video. The video is about 11 minutes long. When you first turn it on, there's no audio, so don't panic. So go and watch the video. You can leave this meeting. I'm going to leave the meeting open, but you can leave the meeting and come back to it. Okay, but the meeting is going to stay open. I'll pause the recording. So go away, watch the video, take a break. It's 11:33. Why don't we come back at 12 o'clock?
12:05.
Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Agree. Okay.
See you at 12 o'clock.
Party will be willing to, you may end up getting what you really want if you're willing to give.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, if you give, you may sort of create an obligation on the other side.
Yes.
They might feel like they owe you one.
Yes, yes. And it will also lead to a more long-term relationship as well.
Yeah, I think they said in the video, if you want to use that kind of an idea, be the first to give.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's move on and we'll carry on with the material that we were going to be talking about. But I hope that was useful. Watching the video on your own rather than watching it in real time with everybody else. You can watch it on your own. Was that a good thing to do? Be able to just send you the material like that, have you look at it on your own, and then we can talk about it together. Is that better than watching it all together?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Good. So we can review. Thank you.
Okay. Because for next week, I'm trying to decide the trust presentation that I'm going to do. It's my own with my own slides and PowerPoint. I can present it kind of like we're presenting today. I can click through the slides and we can talk and you can listen like we would in the classroom. Or I haven't done it yet, but I can do a recording of the whole thing. Now it would be about an hour if I recorded the whole thing. And I could send you the recording in advance of the class, and you could listen to the recording. And we could do that instead of an hour in the class. Our session will be a lot shorter because you would have already watched the video. Or we can watch the video together and stop and start and talk as we go along. Which of those ways do you think is better, watching the recording or watching it live?
Watching the recording, I think, for me
Recording is
personally.
more efficient way.
Well, you know what I'm going to try to do here, just a minute, just for fun. I have a way of asking you all something. Just a minute. Add a question. Add a question. Poll 1, edit. Oh, okay. I guess I don't know how to do that. All right, back to Zoom. All right, I'll figure out how to do that later. So generally speaking, watching it recording or on audio, yeah. Watching a recording, how long? Is an hour too long?
Yeah, it's too long.
That's a bit long for a recording. Well, the video you sent, the one on persuasion, is actually just right.
Right. So something longer than that, I guess it's better that we'll just do it in class, and I record them all anyway. I'll be recording what we talk about in class. So if anybody wants to go back and look at the recording afterwards, they can.
That's
Okay.
good. That's awesome.
That does make sense to me.
Can you divide them into segments according to the topic, and we can discuss segment by segment so as not to get lost in a 1 hour video?
Well, we could discuss it. Yeah, as we're going through it, we could talk about it piece by piece. When I send you some people think the advantage of watching the video, on your own, is that you can stop and start and stop and start, think about it, write things down, whatever. And for some people, that's a little bit easier than having to listen to it, in real time. And if you don't quite get something, then you feel like it's gone away. But if you're watching a recording, then you can stop and start it.
Okay.
There was a note to the chat room, I think. Okay, Jane, I see your note. If the topic is critical or difficult to understand, maybe video watching with group and discussion follow. Yeah. Video lecture is okay. Well, it is, okay. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for all that. I'll think about what's the best way to do it. Okay, share screen. Okay, we're back to what we're doing before. So power in negotiation, where does it come from? What are the sources? And it's as I say, it's not really good or bad. It's how you use it, right? Oops. Why is that not changing? There we go. So power, I want to make sure we don't go too long on this one, but so we'll talk a little bit about the different kinds of power: informational power, reward power, coercive power, legitimate, expert, and referent. So informational power, that just really means that if you know more about something than somebody else, if you're an expert in something, you have more information, then that can give you an advantage where you know something that they don't. You can present your facts, you can present the data, you might be able to do very fancy, graphs and charts and things like that. That can be very intimidating. On the other hand, it can be a good technique to do, so people are less likely to argue with you because they recognize you as an expert, and you say, okay, well, we'll take your word for it. Okay, so if one side has a lot more information than the other, then that can be a factor in the negotiation. Reward power, I like this one. One party is able to offer something of perceived value to the other. Okay, I mean, parents, this is classic, right? Parents and children, you know, behave yourself or you won't get a treat after supper. Or, you know, so the parent has the power to withdraw something and offer something. So reward goes both ways, or sometimes the opposite is called punitive power, if one party can punish the other, okay? So if you are negotiating and you say, well, you know, I've got a lot of money in my budget, I've got a lot of money to spend, so if you want this deal, you know, I can offer that, so let's get down to it. I have something that you need. I have a big budget and I'm prepared to spend it. Coercive power, same thing, the reverse actually. Taking away or withholding something, punishing, canceling a contract. If I know when I was working for a company some years ago, we were an airline maintenance company. We maintained aircraft, and WestJet was one of our biggest customers. And they just came to us one day, and like WestJet is a very good company to fly on, but they're not a very good company to do business with as a supplier. They just came to us one day and they said, we want to reduce our maintenance fee with you, you know, the price to maintain an airplane. And we said, well, we've got a contract that already says it's this much money. And they said, well, we're reducing it right now, or else we'll terminate the contract. And they had the ability to terminate the contract. And so we said, okay, thank you, terminate the contract, goodbye. We decided to do without their business because the price they were asking was just so low, so low, so low. We didn't want to do the business, but they had the power to take away the contract, take away the business. And they tried it. It didn't work on us, but sometimes it can work. And it says it can have damaging effects on the long-term relationships. Yeah, we never did business with WestJet again. And we were one of the biggest aviation maintenance companies in Canada. So they had to go to smaller companies to get the maintenance on their aircraft. Legitimate power, this comes back to the authority as well. People that have the power to do things, their official position. It could be in a family, it could be a military, of course. The military, the rank. The higher ranks have more power, and so that can come power, can be powerful. Expert, it's the same as informational power, but it's taken to a next level. If you are really an expert, we put letters after our name. We have a degree. We have got credentials. We put et cetera, et cetera. We put our degree on the wall. When I worked at BCIT here in Vancouver, they asked me when I was moving into my office, they said, you have university degrees, don't you? And I said, yes, I have 3. They said, well, why don't you put your degrees up on the wall so people can see them? And you know, I had never done that. I had never done that. And they said, oh, well, here in this environment, you're working in an academic environment, and if people walk into your office and they see you've got 3 university degrees on your wall, they'll be impressed. Okay, so I did. I brought the degrees into the work, and I had never had them on my wall ever before, ever. But in that environment, the academic environment, it was considered to be important if you were an expert to show that you were an expert. Referent power, and this comes back to the liking and the not so much the authority, but the liking and the consensus, if you will. But so if people do like you, they think you're honest, they think, someone mentioned charisma before. Dr. Bonnie Henry has charisma, and your friendliness and your empathy and sensitivity, it's all coming down to trust in a way. But if other people like you, then you're bound to negotiate with somebody that seems to be an honest person, is very and is likable, or somebody else referred you to them and said this is a very good person to do business with, then you are generally, that person will have some degree of power over you in the sense that you will be feeling quite amicable and willing to negotiate with them. So, as we said, a power by itself is not the big good thing or the bad thing. It's what you do with it, right? And so you need to be careful how you use it, and don't abuse it. And sometimes you can use two things together. So the key is just to understand where the power comes from, and that you probably have more power than you think you do. And it's part of the preparation that you do when you're setting up your negotiation. We talked about strengths and weaknesses and whatnot. Well, where do you think you might have power over the other person, and in what way, and how, and then how should we use it, or should we not use it? And that's a key step. Concessions, and this is the give and take. This really is the give and take. I'm just going to stop the share for 1 second here. I think there you go. Stop share. Yeah, the concession is the plan that we're going to follow to give and take, and what is of value. I just want to check on a piece of material here. I wanted to get a certain slide up for you, but it doesn't. I think it's coming. Okay. I've mixed together a couple of presentations here, and so I wanted to make sure that I had the right material, the right slide. So concessions, it's what you're doing. You may have said, hey, I really want this position, but you'll move away from that position in such a way that the other side, gets something. That's a concession. It's the give and take process, and it's really what's going on. It's kind of a fancy word, and so it's important to kind of keep track, when you've given something, that you get something back, and always keep your BATNA in mind. If you don't get something and things are not going the way that you want, what is your BATNA? And are you getting to the point where you might feel like you might want to walk away? And if you did feel like that, then what would your BATNA be? Or do you need to make a concession to keep the negotiation going? Okay. For some reason, my clicker doesn't always work. There we go. Oh, here we go. Here's the slide. I copied this from somewhere else. This sort of says the whole story on concessions, right? We talk about things. What is the cost to us of a given thing? Okay. If we were to give it up, what would it cost us? If we were to get something from the other side, what would it cost them to give it to us? Okay. If we're going to give, if they want to give us something, or if we want to give something to them, what would be the value to them? And if we're asking something from them, what is the value of that to them? Are we asking them to give something that's really big on their side? Okay. And then the value to us. And when you're planning your negotiation and you have the various issues, and there are lots of issues. And then you think, okay, well, on this particular issue, this issue is not very important to us, but we think it's very important to the other side. Okay, so this might be a really good thing as a concession. We could give up, we could give in on this issue because we really don't care, but it's of high value to them. So if there's an item that can be given that is low cost to us and high value to them, not kind of diagonally across the circle, but that's obviously a good thing. That would be an easy thing to do. And if all negotiations went that way, they would be very smooth. If I can give something that's of very little cost to me, but big value to you, I'll do it. And if you give something to me that's a big value to me and less value to you, you'll do it. The trick is, or the trouble happens when you hit something that is high value to both. But here's how the value and cost work, right? So you kind of keep that diagram in mind, and for every issue, assess it in terms of the four pieces of the square. What's the cost to us? What's the cost to them? Or cost or value, importance, important to us, important to them, value to us, value to them. Now, if you don't think about how the concessions are going to go, then the negotiation may just kind of grind down, right? The other thing that we need to remember is we talked about the negotiating zone, the zone of possible agreement. If you give a concession and the other side doesn't really seem to react to it, or they're not very interested in it, then maybe you don't have a zone of agreement. Maybe you don't have overlap. Maybe you're not even in the right area. And so if you give concessions and something doesn't seem to happen, then ask questions. Ask questions. Say, okay, hey, we've given you two things here, and it doesn't sound like you're willing to give anything back in return. Have we got a problem here? So that's a good sign, right? Now, concessions should be made in decreasing increments, not increasing ones. Well, that's like, so if I want to buy it for $10 and you'll only sell it for 20, and I say, okay, I'll go as high as $10.10. Like, we're $10 apart, so I make a 10-cent concession. What's that telling you as the seller? It's telling you that I'm really not going to move very much. I'm prepared to move a little, but I'm not going to move much. Whereas if you want 20 and I'm prepared to pay 10, I say, okay, well, all right, how's 17? I've immediately made a big jump. Well, they're saying that your concessions should be big first and smaller later. So I go up to $17 and then maybe 10 cents, or I go up another 50 cents. And ideally you converge. Now the statement here about if you do make a $1 concession and then you give away a $2 concession after that, there's a temptation for the other side to say, all right, I'm just going to sit and wait and see what you say next. It seems to be getting better. There's a big debate as to whether or not you should go up or down, and smaller, bigger and then smaller, smaller than bigger, and whether you should move into the negotiation zone more quickly. There's the whole idea of giving. When you give, you create a reciprocity, et cetera, et cetera. So the statement here, I would think, is generally true, but there certainly could be situations where it might make more sense to make a big concession first if you want something back. Okay. Any thoughts on that? Should you, when you're negotiating, should you give something first, or should you wait for the other side? Who should make the first offer? Thoughts? Can somebody speak up? Maybe I've got my audio off. B, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So everybody can hear me. Okay, I thought maybe my audio or your audio might be off. Okay, thank you.
So on concessions, yeah, because the thing here is, if you give them such a grand gesture right away, it seems like they can gain a lot from you. I mean, you know, they can push you to further limit. That's why it's best it's in if you do concessions, it's in increments and of differing value to you.
Yeah, and it can be, and this is where I think a lot of cultural stuff can come in here. In previous conversations, you people who are from India, you've talked a little bit about, you know, how culturally the negotiations go. Maybe could one of you share with us a little bit about, like, what's the traditional way of negotiating in that culture? Is it to, you know, give away big things, little things, nothing at all? How should it work?
I didn't really get what you meant. Can you repeat the question?
Could you speak up, Sajeev?
Can you repeat the question, sir? I didn't really get what you meant.
I still can't hear you very well.
Hello.
Yes?
Yeah, can you repeat the question, sir? I didn't fully understand you that one.
I was wondering if people who have experience with negotiating in India, when you're negotiating, is it expected that you know, when you start the negotiation, you would give something in order to get something, or do people tend to hold back and wait until they get something else from the other side? Do you start big or do you start small?
I think, sir, it depends. It depends on the situation. There are situations, if there are multiple people involved, then if you're staying back, then you might lose the opportunity to acquire whatever that you're trying to. So I think it depends on the situation. If you have to go with something that that the opposite party should attract, then I think you should make your move at the first. You know.
Okay.
That's what I think of. I don't know what others think of. This is my perception.
Somebody else.
Hello. Yeah. So I think it's beneficial if you make the offer. If you're the one who will make the move first. Like for example, we have this specific what do you call this zone, right? If you are the one who set, for example, if you are the first one who set the price, then maybe the other side will think of on that range. Like the negotiation will play on a certain range. So that means the one who set the price first have the control of the range. Like for example, if you say, oh, it's for $15. So the other party would likely be on that specific price. So in that case, the one who was in control now is the one who set the price first. So that's what I think. Like it could be related also with the power. Like if you had the first move, then you had the power to negotiate over the other side. So that's what I think.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree with Jendel because you actually set the pace, or you actually open the negotiations basically if you make the first offer, I suppose.
Okay.
Can I go next?
Yes.
I agree and disagree. For example, if I put the offer, if I made the offer first, maybe the other person I'm negotiating with has the feeling that I am not on a stable position and he can stick to what he's thinking. I mean, if I, for example, if he said this thing is for $20 and I started with 15, this may give him the impression that I don't have enough fund to go through the process of buying this thing, and he will set apart and don't move on to negotiate the price because it's far 15 from 20.
Yep. It certainly, it talks about what you think the range might be.
Okay.
Sorry?
Alexander.
Yeah. Well, I believe that there is no perfect formula. Yeah, and it depends on your strategy. So if you like start negotiations and you make a first step, and this step is beneficial for counterparty, it can brings you new opportunities and open like more room to move. So it depends, and you have to like prepare and evaluate what will you do. Will you make first step or not?
Right, right. Well, here's what sometimes happens, and this is what everybody kind of is afraid of happening. So suppose I want to buy something from you, and I say okay, and I make the first offer. Okay, I'll pay $15 for that to you, and you say okay, done.
Right.
Well, now I walk away thinking, oh my God, he agreed right away. Maybe I offered too much.
Yeah, that's why.
Maybe I could have got it for less. Maybe I should have let him make the first offer. maybe his first offer would have been 13. So this all comes down to lack of preparation and not knowing, where the most likely price should be. And so the more you prepare, the better idea you have about where the likely price should be. We all want, nobody wants to walk away thinking they got ripped off, right?
Yeah, that's why I said you have to be prepared.
Right, absolutely. And I agree with you, Alexander. There is no perfect way. Okay, let's carry on. I think we're just about at the end, so we can go away a little early. Okay, here we go. Back to the share. So the idea about whether we should give progressively bigger concessions or progressively smaller ones, usually the concessions get smaller as you go. You may agree to pay $2 more, and then an additional 50 cents, and an additional 25 cents, and etc., so long as the other side is making concessions in return. Oop. So when you're doing your concession plan, you have to make sure that if you've got a maximum price you're going to pay, if your maximum price is 20, well, and you're probably not going to offer 18 right off the bat, because then you've got nowhere else to move. So they may say, well, how about 25? And you're already sort of painted yourself into a corner. You've put yourself up against your maximum right away. So generally speaking, start with a number that is far enough away from your maximum position that it will give you room to maneuver. Okay. Try to get the other party to reveal their needs and objectives first. Well, okay. So that's the idea of trying to get them to make the first move. But it says be first to concede on a minor issue, but not first on a major one. Well, I don't know. What if both sides think that? Then where do you go from there, right? Like if both sides have been to this course and both sides read this slide, then neither side wants to be the first to concede on a major issue. Somebody has to be first, right? So the strategy about whether to be first or not, I don't think is all that clear, just as Alexander said. But certainly if you do give, it's a major one, but is it a major to both parties? Maybe it's a major one for you, it's a minor one for them, a major one for them, a minor one for you. So there are no quick answers. But it says make unimportant concessions and portray them as valuable. Like if you give up something, don't tell them that it wasn't a big thing for you. If you could try to get them to believe that you've given them something and say, hey, that really hurt. Like my boss is really going to, question me for that one. I should never have done that probably, but I'll increase the price by $5 here, but that's a big deal. That's a really big deal. Whereas in fact, it might not have been a big deal at all. But if you can get the other side to think that you gave them something that was of value to you, then they may feel the reciprocity thing. Again, I guess that's a tactic, right? Make the other party work hard for every concession. See, these are all very one-sided statements, right? Make the other party work hard. Well, both parties are going to make the other party work hard. Then what's that achieving? So some of these things I don't really agree with necessarily. But anyway, use trade-offs to obtain something for every concession you make. Sure, that makes sense, right? And whether you go slowly and give a little, same thing. Do not reveal your deadline to the other party, ever. I don't necessarily agree with that either. There might be an advantage. Make the negotiation go quicker if you tell them what your deadline or your bottom line price or whatever. There might be an advantage to that on a given issue. Okay, but I think it's generally true, but never say never, right? Now, keeping a record is, yeah, do not concede too much, too often, too soon, and keep a record. These are just some general guidelines but keeping a record is very important. As the negotiations go along, keep a record of what you gave, what they gave, what happened, because some negotiations get really long, like weeks, and there can be dozens, if not hundreds of issues, and you may lose track. And then people might start what they call bundling, putting certain issues together, etc. And to put two small issues together that make a bigger one. So keeping a record is very, very important. Keeping notes, making minutes, if you will. Even if you have somebody on your team, that's their job. They don't speak at all, but it's their job to just make a record of everything, note everything down, just so we can keep track, okay? Not so much for legal purposes, but just so we don't lose track of where we are in the negotiation. Okay. Okay, we'll continue to the tactics a little bit, and then I think we'll finish off. Yeah. And we've seen all these before, right? Can be either ethical or unethical tricks or ploys. We can talk about the ethics, I guess. There's a quick story that I'll tell you that someone told me. This didn't actually happen to me, but they were in a negotiation that had been going on for quite some time. It was two teams, so like 5 against 5, and there was one person on the other team who was just very difficult to get along with. Even the people on his own team didn't particularly like him. He seemed to object to everything. Whenever anything was said, he would jump in and say, "Well, I don't agree with that." he was just very disruptive, and things were not going very well. And you could tell that the people on the other team didn't really appreciate him being there. Anyway, they were on the last day of the negotiation, and they were lunchtime. They took a lunch break, and one of the people from the other team came to my friend and said, when you come back from the lunch, bring back with you a snack, like a bowl of peanuts or something. Just bring a package of peanuts and put them on the table and eat them for your snack or something when you come back from lunch, okay? And, don't tell anybody I said that. So they did that. They came back after lunch, and they put a bag of peanuts on the table, and they were kind of sharing the peanuts among themselves and as a snack. And this difficult person on the other side of the table jumped up and said, "Oh my God, I can't stay here. I have to leave. I have a severe allergy to peanuts. I'm out of here. I just can't stand it." And he walked out and he left. And nobody said anything, but the negotiations went very smoothly for the rest of the day. And they came to an agreement. So, was that a trick? Or was that a ploy? Was that a tactic? Was it a smart thing to do? Was it a dumb thing to do?
That was brilliant.
It was brilliant. Some people say brilliant. Some people say unethical.
Yeah.
Some people say you should never do that. Some people say it was a very brilliant thing to do. Again, there's no clear answer. But you can get into ethics and tricks and ploys. But if you find out later you were tricked, you probably don't appreciate it. But yeah. So there are lots of stories, right, like that. So here, common negotiation tactics. I mean, lowballing and highballing. I mean, making offers that are lower than they should be or higher than they should be to try to influence the negotiation. Lowballing, like we said before, the person that makes the first offer kind of sets the tone. So people will lowball, or if they're selling a highball. I mean, you see this a lot in the public sector negotiations. Teachers and nurses and things like that. They negotiate in public, and you find out that the government has made an offer to the nurses union of no increase at all, 0 increase in salary for the next 3 years. That's their offer. Well, everybody knows that's not going to be the final settlement, and it's a low ball. Okay. Of course, the nurses come back and say, we want 5% per year for the next 5 years and a 20% bonus, whatever. They ask for way more than they think they're going to get, but they're sort of setting the boundaries. Okay. So honesty and openness. Well, to be honest with you, I really think whenever you hear somebody saying that, to be honest with you, and I really think, and I'm being, to be perfectly open with you, when someone says that, be very suspicious. A best and final offer. Is it really a best and final offer? This is my best. If you can't accept this, we're walking away. Questions. People ask questions. People do silence. They just sit sometimes, wait for you. Caucus is a very good thing to know what to do. When you're in a meeting and there's something you don't understand, don't be afraid ever to just call a stop to the meeting. Just say, excuse us, could we take a 5-minute break, a 10-minute break, or whatever, a break till after lunch? We would like to speak among ourselves. A caucus is a meeting of your own team. And especially when things are not going the way you might thought they would go, a caucus is a very, very powerful thing to do, and you should never be afraid to do it. Call a break, even if it's just to go stand in the hallway for 5 minutes and come back in, even if you do nothing. A caucus is a good thing, and you can, I've done negotiation in various languages. One I remember was with I was negotiating with Greek people in English, and they all spoke English very, very well, but they were from Greece, and I was the seller and they were the buyer. Yes, I was the seller, they were the buyer, and we were negotiating, and the negotiations were going very well. There was never any problem, but every once in a while they would just say to me, Doug, a few words in Greek, please. And they would speak among themselves right at the table in Greek, because they knew I couldn't understand anything they were saying. So they could have a private conversation right in front of me. And they were just asking questions of each other. And, they told me later, we were just making sure we all understood the same thing. And they could have been talking about me. They could have been talking about anything. I don't know. But so it was a very trusting relationship. So they could speak their own language right in front of me because they knew I couldn't understand. And it went very well. Venue. Do you negotiate? Do you travel to negotiate, or do you tell the other side they have to travel to negotiate? Like if you're in different countries or across the city, even if you're 2 blocks away, or even if you're down the hall. You come to my office. No, you come to mine. Well, all right. Well, let's meet at the water cooler, or we'll fly to where you are, or you fly to where we are. So choosing the venue can have a big impact on the outcome or the way the negotiations go, I should say. There are the 6 powers of influence we talked about. We won't go into that again. So here they are. So the description of what you saw in the video, and then tactics when we're done. So how do you overcome tactics? Again, it's preparation. If someone's going to try something, you think they might try something, or you've heard they do it before, then just prepare for it, okay? Because if they try a tactic and you aren't prepared, or you're worried, or you've got a deadline, or you're not experienced or whatever, then they'll know that, and the tactic will work. Now, I guess the reverse is if you know they're not prepared and you've got the upper hand, then you never know a tactic will work. But try not to react without thinking. There's a great acronym which I'll give you right now. WAIT. In English, it spells wait, right? Of course, WAIT, wait. Well, it stands for why am I talking? So when you are not sure what to say, ask yourself, wait, why am I talking? So wait, think, maybe call the caucus, call a break. If you don't know what to say or you're puzzled, then just stop and say, I think we need to have a break. It's lunchtime, it's coffee break time, whatever. Or could you please repeat the question rather than answering it? Or say, I don't really understand the point here. Could we maybe go over that again? Anything to avoid answering the question before you are ready to answer it, before you've had a chance to think about it. Okay. So, a busy day.
What a busy day.
You have another class today?
No, but we have a lot of assignments to do.
Ah, yes, right. Oh, yeah, speaking of which, on the outline, it uses the word assignments. Like there was an assignment for class number 1. You don't need to do those. Those are purely for your own reference. Okay. If you want to, like someone did send me their answers to the assignment and just for me to read, and I read them and I gave them comments back. So if it's useful for you to do the assignment and like answer the questions from the textbook, if you find that useful to do it, and feel free to send them to me. I'm happy to read your answers and give you comments back. But they're not, you don't have to do them. They're not mandatory, and they don't really count, for credit for anything. Not really. But if you want to do them, by all means do them. Or if you read the questions and you're not sure of the answers, by all means, send me an email. Okay. Any further thoughts? Questions, comments? If not, I'll see you next week and we'll talk about trust.
Okay.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, sir.
Bye, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you, sir.
Bye, bye, bye.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Bye.
Have a nice day to you. Bye.
I will put the
Bye to all. Enjoy your day. Stay safe. Stay
Bye.
home.